Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. Merry Christmas all and happy week 17 championship week. Absolutely buzzing. It's been a long but fun season, and now it's time to make sure we get those lineups perfectly set for this next few days worth of games, and we can make sure that you're bringing home that championship. So I'm going to run you through some of my favorite starts, some players I'm looking to avoid this week at all four of the major positions. And of course, I will also be answering all of your questions, whether that be start sits for week 17 or something more dynasty or rookie adjacent. So let's dive straight in with the quarterbacks. I'm going to go with a golden tier, Christmas, let's go golden. And then we're going to go with the brown tier. So the quarterbacks, the good, the starts, the guys that, I'm not going to talk through your top five options at every position. You're starting those. But Brock Purdy, Jacoby Brissett, Tyler Shuck, Malik Willis, and Tyler Huntley. Let's start with Brock Purdy. He's my QB5 this week. Now, it's an okay matchup against Chicago. They're 16th in adjusted fantasy points allowed, but 51.5 point over under. Brock Purdy has been on an absolute tear the last couple of weeks. 26.2, 30.9 points, and this offense is absolutely firing. The run game, the offensive line still isn't fully firing, but this, Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, they are in their bags. This is a must-win game for the 49ers to stay in the hunt for that number one seed in the NFC. Chances are they're probably going to end up the 5 or 6 seed, but if the Seahawks do drop any games over the next 2 weeks, the 49ers could jump in there. Interestingly as well, the Chicago, they're 5 DBs on the injury report. Yes, okay, their 2 starting corners are fine, but corners 3, 4, 5, and 6, as well as their free safety, are all on the injury report, so depth in the secondary could be limited. So love Brock Purdy this week, and he's definitely a top 5 must start for me in every league. So we've got a few questions in the chat. If you do want to get your start sits answered, feel free to dive in the comments down below. Let's start with Tyler. So he's saying Burden or Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith has bad weather. I'm not overly concerned. I'm a person that doesn't, I think weather can sometimes be overplayed when it comes to start sits. To give you an idea, I've got Devonta Smith as a wide receiver 2 this week. Luther Burden is in the wide receiver 4 category for me. So it's Devonta Smith quite comfortably. Gary, one of our members in the chat, is asking Quentin Johnson or Christian Watson. The true answer is neither. I don't particularly like either this week. Both as kind of wide receiver 4-5 types. I'd probably lean Quentin Johnston I'm a little bit nervous about Malik Willis's passing volume, and I think that Baltimore secondary is impressive now. I think Nate Wiggins could potentially shadow Christian Watson, and that's a tough matchup for Watson. So I'd lean Quentin Johnson, but I've got them back to back in my rankings. So I'd potentially be pivoting elsewhere. And if you hang around till I get to the wide receivers, you'll find out why both are no's for me this week. And then Tyler's also asking Strange or Schultz, with Schultz having better volume. So again, I'm going to talk about both these guys in tight ends when we get there, but it's Brenton Strange for me this week. I think he's got a much better matchup against Indianapolis. They do really struggle against the tight ends, 27th in adjusted fantasy points. Whilst I think Dalton Schultz could see the volume, I think that's going to be quite a low-scoring game. Charge defense is competent, but very good against tight ends, and we know that Houston secondary is amazing. So I'd lean Strange, but appreciate consensus is probably slightly the other way. And then we've got Luft Music 2284 asking Burrow or Dart this week. I've got Joe Burrow is a top 2 quarterback for me this week. Jackson Dart's outside the top 12. So it's a very, very, very clear Joe Burrow. And then Josh is asking, Dice question, already eliminated, what price to sell Josh Jacobs to one of the finalists? Both teams sniffing around, but don't want to undersell. So this is where, to me, I love making dynasty trades in the playoffs. I think any league that has a dynasty trade deadline, it's horrendous. It should never be allowed, because look, you should be able to overpay to get a title, and the teams that aren't in the final should be able to sell at a premium for that price. So Just diving into my survival kit, my trade calculator values Josh Jacobs around the late first, so a contenders first. So if you're looking to sell him to either of those contending teams, the least I would want is their first round pick. But given you've got both of them sniffing around him, given Josh Jacobs, the contract situation, he could be cut by the Packers at any point. So I would potentially want a first and a second for Josh Jacobs. Maybe if you can, play one off against the other, play that's kind of fear of loss to both of them, maybe you can drive that price up. But yeah, at least a first, but I want another asset on top to sell, because anytime you're selling a player to a finalist, it's got the chance of, tilting the league, tilting the money. And I think you need to pay up for that as such. And then Rory said, oh, I sold T-Law on the 106 for Lamar to a finalist. Yeah, love that. I know Lamar's had a bad year this year, hasn't been great, but anytime you can get Lamar Jackson in that trade, I think that's an absolute smash, because as much as I'm a huge T-Law fan, I don't think he's got that top 5 kind of fantasy season in him. And I think Lamar has certainly got a few more, whether that's in Baltimore or somewhere else, who knows. The next quarterback I'm going to talk about, though, is Malik Willis. He's a high-end QB2 for me this week, based purely on rushing volume. Last time he started week 16, well, didn't start week 16, spot duty, 10 rushing attempts to 11 pass attempts. Now, yes, that was game script led slightly, but I think, look, Malik Willis, anytime you're going to potentially get double-digit rushing attempts from a quarterback for fantasy, that's an absolute goldmine. So really, really intrigued and think that's an absolute smash. I also think, look, Baltimore may have one foot out the door. Are we convinced that Baltimore, given, season from hell, are they really going to come ready to play with no Lamar under center? I think that Malik Willis is also playing for big money and a potential starting. I don't think there's enough being made of the fact that this quarterback class, the rookies, is one, hopefully two, but probably not many more starting options. Free agency looks pretty dry. So I think teams are going to need quarterbacks in 2026, and I think Malik Willis is potentially going to put himself at the front of that queue. If he has a really good game this week, it could potentially earn him 40, 50, 60 million over, a 2-year contract, something like that. Do we see a Justin Fields? He obviously signed 2 years, 40 million, 30 million guaranteed with the Jets. Could you see that with inflation, 2 years, 50 million for Malik Willis? I wouldn't be shocked. So I think it's massive for him. So I think he's going to have a good week. And I think the Packers are going to want to be seen to giving him that opportunity to have a big week. Not only for him, not only because it helps him in the playoffs, but also could potentially bring a comp pick back. Before we move into the Browns here, though, remember, I'll be answering every single question in the chat. So if you've got any questions, dive in there, ask them, start sits, trades, or any Dynasty or rookie questions you have got. Talk of the devil, we got a couple here. Tyler's asking Michael Mayer or Schultz this week. Yeah, Schultz for me by a bit. I love Michael Mayer. I'm a huge Michael Mayer believer, but I do think even in with no Brock Bowers, it's a little bit of a stretch to put him inside the kind of top 15 at the position, whereas I think Dalton Schultz is a clear-cut top 10. Austin's saying full PPR, bench one, Amarian Hampton, Jacoby Myers, or T-Mac. So let me just pull up my ranks and values because they all feel about similar range, if I'm being honest. So I would say, just scrolling down, it's a sit T-Mac. So yeah, Hampton's definitely the one, and then it's toss up between Myers and T-Mac. And it's just match up. T-Mac up against Seattle, second in adjusted fantasy points allowed. Indianapolis 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. So yeah, definitely Hampton and Myers for me this week. In the Browns here, as you can see, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Cam Ward, Bryce Young, Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'm going to start with Josh Allen. He's my QB7 this week. He's got a tough matchup against Philadelphia. I know it's championship week. The idea of potentially sitting Josh Allen seems absolutely wild. And realistically, you're going to need some pretty decent quarterbacks to even consider that. But this is just I'm a little bit nervous. Philly, great defense, second in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. But this is more around potentially limiting Josh Allen's rushing. We've seen the foot injury, obviously, didn't practice Tuesday, limited practice Wednesday, and then had a full practice this week. I'm concerned that the foot injury is lingering. I'm concerned that it could limit his rushing. And look, the Bills don't have a huge amount to play for over the next couple of weeks in terms of playoff seeding. So I do think that we're going to see Josh Allen with one eye to the playoffs and trying to get healthy. And I just wonder if the Bills try to take the air out of the ball, just run it with, James Cook 25, 30 times, a little bit of Ray Davis sprinkled in, maybe some Ty Johnson, and just try to run it that way, given there's potentially bad weather around as well. So nervous for Josh Allen. I don't think you can get away from him. As I said, he's my QB7 this week, but not feeling hugely confident about him. And then another quarterback that I'm not feeling hugely confident about here is Justin Herbert. QB18 for me this week. Do we need to talk any more about this Houston defense? It's absolutely loaded. The defensive line is balling. Two, premium edge rushers. And then the Chargers offensive line, I think they're on, is it tackles 5 and 6 so far this year? It's not a recipe for success. What Justin Herbert has been doing over the past few weeks is absolutely bonkers. He's been playing some incredible football. It's so good to watch. He is carrying this team almost single-handedly into the playoffs, but I don't think he can do what he did last week. Was it 50% pressure rate and didn't get sacked once? I don't see that happen against this Houston defense. So I'm nervous that he's going to be under duress, under pressure the entire game, and it just means he can't push the ball downfield. We're going to see the ball get out very, very quickly, and that's just not a great recipe for fantasy success. So, yeah, if you can, I'm looking to pivot away from Justin Herbert. And, yeah, very, very concerned about him this week. Remember, though, if you are finding us for the first time, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We are just about to dive into fantasy dynasty content, and that is where I come alive. Plus, we've got Tyler and Tom giving you all of the best ball content you will need. We have got Tristan. Is that Tristan Seal 1424 in the chat? Burrow or May? These are my 1 and 2 QBs this week, so neither of them is a bad answer. I think they're both fantastic. I would lean Drake May. I just think the Jets are done this year. I think the secondary's awful. There's very little in the pass rush. Will McDonald's now gone on IR. I just think that the Jets are already very much out the door. So I think Drake May, the Patriots always like beating up on the Jets, so I don't expect them to rest on their laurels, and I think they're going to absolutely destroy the Jets. So, yeah, very confident in Drake May. He's my QB1 this week. Let's dive across to the running back positions. The golden tier, the must-starts. We've got Ashton Genty, Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Warren, Dylan Sampson, and Blake Corum. Ashton Genty, look, this game is looking like an absolute horror show. We've got the Raiders potentially trying to tell some semi-injured players like Max Crosby not to play. I've seen the Giants have already ruled out a few players. Theo Johnson's now not playing. And it's just looking like both teams would much rather the number 1 overall pick than perhaps a win in this game. But, you dive into the numbers. Yes, okay, lower over under, it's 41.5. The Giants are 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. Ashton Genty's been on a decent little run of volume. Okay, the fantasy production really spiked last week and wasn't there before that, but he's averaging 6 targets a game across his last 6. He had that huge blow up against Houston last week. And I just think that this offensive line is horrendous. Pete Carroll's son is coaching the offensive line. That's why we've not seen the coach fired, despite how bad it's been. And I think that this is almost the Raiders are, look, everybody's going to be gone. This is going to be a complete teardown next year in terms of the coaching staff. I believe in pure talent in games like this, where I don't think either team particularly wants to win. I think both front offices would much rather lose it. So the most talented players on the field are going to stand up because players don't want to lose games. And Ashton Genty is different tier You've seen when he's had opportunities. You saw last week when he broke out in the open field, that deep pass. Like, he is a supremely talented running back. And I just think that this is going to be one of those weeks where he could potentially go absolutely bonkers. So yeah, he's top 10 option for me this week. If you've got him, you've done well to make the playoffs. Let's be brutally honest. If it's a redraft league and you spent a first round pick on him, hopefully it's Dynasty that you are starting him. But I think he's an absolute smash this week. The other two guys I want to touch on, probably both of them, Kenny Gainwell, Jalen Warren, slightly bonkers, but you can start both of them. I've got them both as RB2s this week. I just think this is going to be a real check down heavy week for Pittsburgh. Well, every week's a check down heavy week for Pittsburgh, but more so going up against Cleveland. Rodgers leads the league in percentage of throws behind the line of scrimmage at 22.8% this year. Coming up against this, not elite defense, but two decent pass rushers. Obviously, Myles Garrett going for that record. I don't think Aaron Rodgers wants to be the record-breaking sack. So I think we're going to see him get the ball out insanely quickly. It's no longer going to be 1 to 2 to 3 to check down. I think it's going to be first read and then check down, which means huge volume of passing going to Kenny Gainwell and Jalen Warren. And of course, they're also going to try and run the ball and take the air out of the football a little bit. So yeah, really like both of them this week. Dylan Sampson could potentially be the passing down back in the same game. So intrigued to see if he could get some passing volume. And then Blake Corum, I'll come on to a little bit with Kyren Williams when I talk about him in a second in the Browns here, but just think that he could see more volume than perhaps he has over the last couple of weeks. So like Blake Corum, if you're looking for a desperation flex, which hopefully in the final you're not. A couple of questions before we move into the chats. So Waller, Schultz, Taysom Hill, or Warren at tight end. So that is going to be Dalton Schultz for me. Yeah, Tyler Warren's close. I think Waller and Taysom Hill, your kind of dart throw for, a touchdown basically, but I think Schultz is going to see the more volume. Carl says, order from best start to worst start given starter doesn't start. I don't quite understand that, I'll be honest. Yeah. Dive in the comments and let me know, Carl. I don't quite understand what you mean, but we'll move on. Over in the Browns here, we have got Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, Kyle Monange, and Ramondre Stevenson. Saquon Barkley, on paper, this looks like a good game. I think Buffalo are terrible against the ground, 25th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. We've seen the Bills consistently get beaten up because they are undersized, 220-pound linebackers. They are a small defense. But I think this is a low over-under game at 43.5. The weather is potentially bad. This Eagles offensive line is still not fully healthy, still not fully firing. And I just don't think that they're going to be able to sustain Saquon Barkley 25, 30 carries that some people are projecting. So I'm not saying this is a bad week for Saquon Barkley. I'm not, I'm still starting in most places, but he's outside my top 10. I don't feel hugely confident in him this week. And if you can pivot off him, I would certainly start Ashton Genty ahead of him. And I'd potentially be looking elsewhere given this matchup. I think he's going to be lower scoring than perhaps people think. The next guy I want to touch on, as I mentioned with Blake Corum, Kyren Williams. Look, the Rams are 8.5-point favorites. The over-under is good at 49.5, but I just think this could be an absolute trouncing from the Rams. I think that the Falcons have got nothing to play for. I think that they could potentially get run up on. We've seen Kyren Williams' snap share tick up over the last couple of weeks. He was at 71% last week, but before that it was 54, 51, 67. He had a 58 in there. I do wonder if we're going to see the Rams go up early and then start resting players for the playoffs. And that's where I think I'm nervous on Kyren Williams. I've got him outside my top 15. He's still kind of an RB2, but he's not a must start for me. And that's where I've got Blake Corum in that sneaky kind of dart throw flex territory, just because I think there could be some volume there. Other guys I'm nervous on, Josh Jacobs, clearly not healthy, just a little bit concerned about that. Kyle Monange, I think not going to see the volume. He's a touchdown or bust type option. And then Ramondre, I know some people are really excited about him, given potentially Henderson might not see a full workload. Look, it's a concussion. It's not anything physical with the body. If Henderson clears the concussion protocol, he's going to get a full workload. And so I'm not nervous there. Carl's dived back in. Thank you for clarifying. Mayer, Hill, Musgrave, Jawar Jordan, Raheem Sanders, Dawson Knox, and Tongs. So that would be start order from best to start. So I would go Taysom Hill, presuming that's the Hill. I would then go Michael Mayer, Josh Tongs. Then if Kittle doesn't play, if Kittle does play, Tongs is bottom of this list. I then go Jawar Jordan, Raheem Sanders, unless Dylan Sampson doesn't play, and then Raheem Sanders would jump ahead of Michael Mayer, and then Dawson Knox. So to sum up, it would be Hill, Mayer, Jordan, Sanders, Knox, Musgrave, Tongs, but Tongs would jump ahead of the running backs and the tight ends other than Hill and Mayer if Kittle doesn't play. Right. But before I dive into the wide receivers, if you do want 24/7 access to myself and Tom, if you want all the rookie content you could ever believe, we are going to be producing another rookie guide this year. It goes out to all silver and gold sanctuary members. Hit the join button down below. From as little as a cup of coffee every single month, you get access to all of our ranks, whether that be Redraft, Best Ball, Dynasty. You get access to my survival kit, which has got my trade calculator, my historic rookie rankings, everything you could ever need to win at Dynasty, and of course all the best ball content you could want as well. Go ahead, hit that join button. You will not regret it. In the wide receivers, we're going to start with the golden tier. So we've got Juwan Jennings, Jacoby Myers, DJ Moore, Alec Pierce, and A.D. Mitchell. Let's start with Juwan Jennings. This is pretty much very similar to what I said about Brock Purdy. I'm really excited about what this 49ers passing offense could do, given the injuries to the Chicago Bears secondary, given the way that the 49ers passing game is functioning since the bye week. Look, 51.5 point over under. Chicago's 30th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. And Juwan Jennings is the clear wide receiver one in this offense, even if Ricky Pearsall is back active. So yeah, absolutely smash start for Juwan Jennings. Really, really love him this week. He's a top 12 wide receiver for me. That is how confident I am on him. And then I want to touch on, so Jacoby Myers has just been balling. Indianapolis struggle against the pass, so he's a nice confident start here. DJ Moore has been playing really well. Rome Odunze's been ruled out again. Lots of people getting excited about Luther Burden, and I'm a huge Luther Burden fan, but I still think DJ Moore's going to get decent volume. And then A.D. Mitchell has been fantastic. I think he's played himself into being a future part of this Jets franchise. And yeah, if you're looking for a wide receiver 3 flex play, A.D. Mitchell, in what I think is going to be a higher scoring game than people are expecting, given the Patriots are going to probably put up a lot of points, will be a nice start. Let's come on to Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce. I always get that wrong. This is where you do a lot of study. I look at a lot of numbers. I watch a lot of film. And there are some times where you just get kind of a gut feel for something. And I think that is where we are with this Alec Pierce this week. Look, Jacksonville struggles against the deep ball. Phil Rivers doesn't really have the strongest arm. He's looked competent the last week, but he's not really, someone that's going to laser it out 30, 40 yards downfield. But I do think that Alec Pierce could win in some contested catch situations with, Rivers pushing the ball outside. It's risky. It's a nervous play, but I think if you're looking for a high upside flex play, maybe as a slight outsider, shall we say, in your matchup, Alex Pierce is, that wide receiver 4 flex play, I think could be a competent option and someone that I'm intrigued by this week. Right, we've got some more questions here in the chat. So, K-Dog, Merry Christmas to you indeed as well, buddy. Need a QB this week. PPR got Bryce, Kirk, Malik Willis, Cam Ward, Rodgers, Gino, or Shador. Gut feel is Malik Willis. Let me just pull up my rankings to confirm that. So I've got, as I said, Malik Willis is kind of a middling QB2 for me. Bryce, Kirk, Cam Ward, Rogers, Gino, and Shador are all outside my top 20. So yeah, it would be Malik Willis by a little bit there. Rory, one of our members again in the chat, asking Jacobs, Pollard, Alec Pierce, sit one. That's going to be Alec Pierce. I know I've just talked him up as a dart throw, but I think the bankable volume from Tony Pollard and Josh Jacobs leans him there. But let me just quickly pull up my rankings. I want to make sure I'm giving you the true answer. Yeah, so Jacobs, Pollard, I think are a little tier ahead. Alec Pierce, I think, whilst Josh Jacobs isn't 100% healthy, I think in these flex plays, I'm always, particularly in the final, I'm always leaning towards bankable volume. I think Jacobs, Pollard, you've got 10 plus touches at least. Alex Pierce is a dart throw. If you were a big underdog, maybe I'd lean Pierce for some upside, but I think go with the bankable volume and hope it's there. Another question, Kenneth Walker or Woody Marks? Nico Collins is my wide receiver one. So my advice is always make these decisions separate. I don't think whether you've got Nico Collins or anything should come into who you start. I get when you're talking, DFS and stuff like that, you're looking at matchups, and yeah, maybe if you had CJ Stroud and Dalton Schultz and stuff like that, maybe another Texan, maybe I'd be nervous about. But if you've only got one Texan, they should both be able to get home and do enough. I'm not getting into that kind of detailed game theory. I want to make this an individual conversation. Despite saying that, I would start Kenneth Walker. I've got him a tier and a half ahead of Woody Marks. I think bankable volume, I think decent matchup against Carolina are 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. I think he should be good. And then also you want to know, if Fanning doesn't play, would you take a chance on Waller or the Jake Tongues? So first of all, it's looking like Fanning is going to play. He said he's going to play. If he is active, I'm confident in that. Obviously, the challenge with the Jake Tongues is you also rely on Kittle not playing. So if Fanning and Kittle don't play, I think I'd still lean Darren Waller. It would be close. It'd be very, very close. But yeah, I'd probably lean Waller. But I think you should be all right because it looks like Fanning is going to play. Right, let's move into the brown tier of the wide receivers. We've got Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Quentin Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, and Darius Slayton. The two Packers, I think this is just a passing volume thing. As I said, Malik Willis, last time he played in mop-up duty for Jordan Love, 10 rush attempts, 11 pass attempts. I just don't think the volume's going to be there for Christian Watson and Jaden Reed to get home, so I'm nervous about those. Quentin Johnson is very much, as I said, about... oh my God, Chargers quarterback. Why am I going blank? Justin Herbert. This is a terrible matchup. Stingley is going to, shadow Quentin Johnson probably, or at least stay on that side of the field. And I just don't think that Herbert's going to have the time to push the ball downfield, which is where Quentin Johnson really looks good last week. So nervous about him. Maybe he gets one deep shot that he brings in and it's, a good fantasy day, but not enough to feel confident in that. Darius Slayton, I don't want any part of that passing game in New York this week. I think it's going to be abysmal. But Jerry Jeudy, I can't believe people are still starting him. I can't believe you're in a potential final and you've got Jerry Jeudy in your lineup. If you have, take a long, hard look at yourself. These are his fantasy points in his last 6 games. 4.2, 4.2, 16.6, 5.6, 2.9, 5.1. Look, Jerry Jeudy is not a good player. His route running is all for show. It's not a real true separator. And Shador Sanders just isn't good and can't force the ball downfield. So yeah, if you've got Jerry Jeudy, go and take a dart throw on some guy that might catch a touchdown, because I don't think Jerry Jeudy is going to. And this Steelers defense, since Jalen Ramsey has moved to safety and nickel exclusively, it has become legit defense again, and I think they're going to absolutely shut down this Cleveland passing game. Before we dive into the tight ends, make sure you're hitting that subscribe, and of course dive in the comments because I'm answering all of your questions. K-Dog is back for another one. PPR, would you take Washington, Pierce, Coca, DK? Gut feel is Pierce off the top of my head, as I just talked about when I was talking about the wide receivers. But let me just dive into my rankings to check. Yeah, I've got Pierce, he's half a tier above Washington, and then Coca and DK are Coca's another half tier below, and DK's kind of 2 tiers below. So it would be Pierce, then Washington, then Coca, then DK. If you wanted for a ranking, which you didn't ask for, but I've given it if you're free anyway. Over to the tight ends now. So we have got the golden tier. We've got Dalton Schultz, Juwan Johnson, Hunter Henry, Colston Loveland, and Brenton Strange. Look, Dalton Schultz, he's been really good volume the last few weeks. I think it's hard to get away from him. Juwan Jensen has been absolute stud. Yes, okay, Taysom Hill's getting all the plaudits, all the attention, but the reason why Taysom Hill was getting so many fantasy points last week was because he was playing running back, not tight end, and that has opened up more snaps for Juwan Johnson. Hunter Henry, the Jets linebackers are woeful in pass coverage. The safeties are completely non-existent. So I think Hunter Henry should have a good matchup against the terrible Jets defense. Colston Loveland looks good. He is legit. He is a top 3 dynasty tight end. If you've not gone out and bought him yet in your dynasty league, go and do that now. But really like the matchup against San Francisco. But the guy I want to talk about a bit more in depth, Brenton Strange. Against Indianapolis, they're 27th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the tight end. This is a must-win game for the Jags. They have still got a potential shot at that number 1 seed. 47.5 point over-under. And most importantly, Sauce Gardner is back for the Colts defense. Now, why that is a good thing for Brenton Strange is that Sauce Gardner plays exclusively outside. Whether that's going to be shadowing Brian Thomas Jr. or potentially shadowing or not shadowing, staying one side and getting a matchup against Jacoby Myers and Park Washington as well, we shall see. But I think what it's going to do is force Trevor Lawrence to look over the middle. That's where Brenton Strange has operated down the seams. He's been over 13 fantasy points in 3 of his last 5 games. And I just think that Brenton Strange could be a really sneaky start. And here is a chance, if you're in a 12-team standard redraft league, Brenton Strange could be sat on your waiver wires. So yeah, really like him this week. We've got a question in the chat about tight ends, so let's dive in. Am I crazy to sit Kittle for Juwan Johnson? Not sure Kittle even plays, and if he does, he might be mostly blocking. If Kittle is active, there is absolutely no chance I am sitting him. I think he has been phenomenal down the stretch since he was injured. So I think if Kittle is active, you have absolutely got to play him. The challenge is that you're not necessarily going to know if Kittle is active when you need to select the Saints, because the Saints are in the early window tomorrow, and obviously the 49ers are playing on Sunday Night Football. So I would say these are the toughest start-sit discussions because you're working with limited information. Let's wait till the early hours news drop from the insiders, whether it be Schefter, Rappaport, whatever. You normally get information about who's going to start, who's going to sit, and it's normally pretty accurate. So if that comes out and it's looking positive for Kittle, maybe you can risk it. But yeah, it's not a bad option. As I said, Juwan Johnson, he's a top 6 option for me this week. Kittle's top 3. Yeah, maybe give it 12 hours. See if you've got more information. If not, roll with Juwan Johnson. If we get confirmation that Kittle is going to start, then maybe you risk it. But yeah, that's a tough one. Good question. And maybe I'll give it some more thought. Over in the Browns here, we've got Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Kincaid, Mark Andrews, and Oronde Gadsden. Darren Waller, you're just hoping for a touchdown. Do you have any faith in Quinn Ewers being able to deliver that? I don't. So yeah, I'm nervous there. Dallas Goedert, he's been phenomenal. Some weeks he's been absolutely non-existent. Others, I think this is a non-existent week. I'm nervous, and I'd be looking to get away from him. He's outside my top 10 this week. Dalton Kincaid, I was saying all season the snap share was an issue, and he continued to produce the most efficient tight end all year, but didn't have a single reception last week. It was painful. He's been below 7 points 3 of the last 4 weeks. I just don't think you can trust him. As I said earlier when talking about Josh Allen, I think they're going to take the air out of the football and run the ball as much as possible in this game. So I'm nervous about Kincaid. I wouldn't start him as a top 20 option. He's a tight end 2 at best, if not probably even lower than that. And then we got Mark Andrews, Oronde Gadsden. Neither should be anywhere near your lineup. You should be looking to move on if you can. that is it for my start sits. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. If you've got any more, dive in quickly, get them in before I disappear. And of course, if you want more start sit questions answered, if you want more Dynasty questions, whether it be trades or whatever, make sure you get them in the comments below. Tom and I will answer them all the way up to Sunday. We commit to answer 100% of your questions. We're back with another question. Thank you. Another one, sorry. Who should I start in full PPR? One wide receiver, one flex. Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Genty. So the wide receiver would be Mike Evans. Look, I'm not the biggest Mike Evans fan, but yeah, it's a better matchup. I think he's going to get better volume. And then I'm going to be starting Genty as well. So yeah, that would be Mike Evans and Ashton Genty. Seems wild that you're sitting T. Higgins, but that is why you have made the final with that roster. So that is it. Thank you ever so much. Make sure you're hitting that like, hit the subscribe, hit the hype while you're there. And of course, hit the join if you want to come in to the sanctuary, get full access to the Discord. Myself, Tom Tyler, in there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Get yourself access to all of our tools, unique content, and of course, the rookie guide when it drops in May.